The decision did not arrive with noise. It arrived with silence, sealed papers, and a father's final signature. Prince Harry had fought many battles from outside palace walls, but this one reached the center of his life, his children. When King Charles confirmed the final decision about Archie and Lilibet's titles, the room around Harry seemed to close in. This was not just royal protocol. This was blood, legacy, and punishment colliding. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry read the confirmation once, then again, as if the words might change if he forced himself to stare long enough. They did not. Charles had confirmed that Archie and Lilibet would not be granted active royal title recognition, would not use HRH styling, and would remain outside the working royal title structure in official palace practice. HRH styling means the formal His Royal Highness or Her Royal Highness form used for senior royals. And the working royal title structure means the official system that connects titles to public duties for the crown. For Harry, that plain sentence felt like a door being shut on his children's names. Charles knew the wound would be deep. The king understood that this was not a small adjustment hidden inside palace language. It was a final ruling, not a temporary pause, and that made it harder, colder, and far more dangerous. He could defend the monarchy. He could explain duty. He could say the crown needed clean lines, but he could not pretend his son would hear those words as anything other than punishment. Harry lowered the page slowly. His face changed before he spoke. Shock gave way to disbelief, and disbelief hardened into something closer to betrayal. Archie and Lilibet were not standing in that room, yet their names carried the whole weight of the decision. Harry had left royal life to protect his family, but now the palace had reached across the distance and touched the one place he still believed was sacred. A senior aide moved before anyone else did. He lifted a second folder from the table and took it away without explanation. The gesture was small, but Harry noticed it. Charles noticed it too. That second file suggested the title decision was not alone. It belonged to a wider review of royal privileges, the benefits, access, and ceremonial rights connected to royal status. Suddenly, the ruling felt less like one decision, and more like the first visible edge of something larger. Harry realized the most painful truth in silence. The palace had prepared this before the confirmation was delivered. The door had already been locked before he knew he was standing outside it. Charles had signed as king, but Harry felt the blow as a father, and now William, Meghan, and Camilla would all be forced to choose where they stood. But before the palace could defend the decision, the people closest to it had to face the personal damage it would leave behind. Behind the titles were not just rules. There were children's names, a father's pride, a grandfather's burden, and a family already split by years of suspicion. Harry saw Archie and Lilibet as innocent heirs to a history they never asked for. Charles saw the monarchy as a fragile institution that could not keep bending. Between them stood William, Meghan, and Camilla, each carrying a different fear. Harry placed the papers on the table, but he did not let them go. His hand stayed on the page, stiff and still, as if touching the decision could somehow stop it from becoming permanent. Meghan watched him closely. She knew that look. It was not only anger. It was a father trying to understand why his children had been pulled into a battle they never started. Title recognition meant the palace officially accepting a royal name and style in its working records. And for Harry, that mattered because it shaped how Archie and Lilibet would one day see their place in the family. Charles carried a different kind of pain. The king believed the crown could no longer allow royal titles to float between two worlds used with royal meaning, but without royal duty, public service, or palace responsibility. The crown meant the monarchy as an institution, not just the person wearing it. And he knew every decision made under that name would outlive his own feelings. He did not want to wound Harry, But he feared that if he bent now, the monarchy would face the same question again and again. Meghan finally reached toward the papers, but Harry's hand did not move. She stopped. That small pause said everything. She understood that this was not only about Archie and Lilibet being denied something. It was about Harry feeling that the palace had found the softest part of him and pressed hard. Meghan felt the insult too, but she also saw the danger. If Harry answered with fire, the palace would call it proof. If he stayed silent, the decision would harden without resistance. William stood on the other side of the wound. The prince believed the ruling would protect the future line, especially the path ahead for George, Charlotte, and Louis. But he knew the cost. Harry would not see protection. He would see rejection. William had spent years preparing for the crown, yet even he could not ignore the human damage sitting beneath the palace language. Camilla asked the question others avoided. Did this decision also close future ceremonial roles for Archie and Lilibet? Ceremonial roles meant public family appearances or symbolic duties connected to royal events, and her question changed the weight of the room. If the ruling reached that far, then this was not only about titles. It was about future visibility, future belonging, future memory. A private note attached to the file carried the coldest line: title clarity must precede succession clarity. Succession meant the order of who comes closer to the throne, and that sentence hinted at a deeper palace strategy. Harry had feared a wall. Now he saw the foundation beneath it. And as the emotional lines were drawn, one question began to haunt the family. Who pushed Charles to make the decision final? The answer leads backward, to one private moment that changed the palace's patience into action. Every royal rupture has a moment people later pretend was smaller than it was. In this story, that moment was not a speech, an interview, or a public accusation. It was a private naming ceremony plan at Windsor, where Archie and Lilibet's future roles were quietly raised. A single conversation turned cold. A single request went too far. And from that day, Charles never looked at the title question the same way again. Harry arrived at the meeting, believing he was protecting his children before the palace could quietly decide their future without him. The Windsor naming protocol meeting was a private palace discussion about how Archie and Lilibet's names, titles, and family positions would be recorded for future royal use. Naming protocol simply means the formal way the palace records names, styles, and roles, so the family knows what is official and what is not. Harry knew those records mattered, because one phrase in a palace file could shape how his children were treated for years. Charles expected a careful conversation. The king thought the meeting would settle language, avoid confusion, and keep the family from another public fight. But Harry wanted more than soft wording. He wanted written assurance that Archie and Lilibet's titles would be formally protected through Charles's reign and even into William's future rule. That request changed everything. It made the room feel smaller. It made the silence heavier. Harry felt the pressure closing around him even then. He believed the palace had already started preparing a version of the future where his children existed as family, but not as recognized royal figures. To him, written assurance was not a demand for power. It was a shield. Archie and Lilibet were too young to defend their own dignity, so Harry tried to do it for them before the family history was written without their names in full. Charles heard something different. The monarch sat still because the request sounded, to him, like permanent royal status without permanent royal responsibility. Royal responsibility meant public service, official duty, and loyalty to the institution, not just connection by blood. The king could not separate that from the titles. He could love his grandchildren, but he could not let the crown become something people entered and left whenever it suited them. William learned the details later, through a documented palace summary prepared after the meeting. The prince read it alone, and his anger stayed quiet, which made it more dangerous. Harry had asked for guarantees that would reach into William's future reign, and the future king saw that as a warning. It was no longer only Charles's problem. It was becoming his inheritance. One line in that summary changed the direction of everything. No title shall be treated as automatic, where duty has been abandoned. William read it once. Charles read it later. Harry would soon feel the force of it. That sentence did not shout, but it carried the power of a gate closing. Once that sentence reached Charles, the family was no longer debating emotion, they were preparing for confrontation. The confrontation happened away from cameras, away from courtiers, and away from the polished language of palace statements. Harry entered the room believing he could still force a father to hear him. Charles remained seated, the signed file beside him, his face unreadable. No anthem, no balcony, no tradition could soften what came next. It was a father and son, separated by a decision neither could undo. Harry did not wait for permission to speak. He asked Charles why Archie and Lilibet had been placed outside active title recognition, and his voice carried the kind of hurt that turns every word sharp. Active title recognition meant the palace officially accepting and using a royal title in its working system, not just treating it as a family name. That mattered because the ruling did not only shape how the children were named, it shaped how they would be seen, invited, and remembered inside royal life. Charles listened without moving. The king knew Harry wanted a father's answer, not a monarch's defense, but he could not separate one from the other anymore. Royal duty meant public service carried out on behalf of the crown, and to Charles, titles could not remain untouched after years of distance, criticism, and separation from palace work. He told Harry that royal names carried weight because they served something larger than personal pride. Harry heard only one thing. His children were being made to pay for his choices. Harry's voice cracked when he said Archie and Lilibet had done nothing wrong. That sentence landed harder than any accusation. Charles looked away because he knew it was true. The children had not spoken against the crown. The children had not walked away from the palace. The children had not chosen exile, interviews, or public war. Yet their names now sat at the center of a ruling built from adult pain. Charles set his pen down slowly. The sound was small, but it ended the argument before the words did. Harry saw it. He understood it. The king was not opening a discussion. He was closing one. That gesture carried the weight of a locked gate, and Harry felt the finality of it before Charles even said the decision would stand. Harry then revealed what he knew from a recorded conversation with a former palace aide. He said the decision had been shaped before this meeting, before this confrontation, before any final appeal could be made. The palace had acted as if it was still listening, while the answer had already been prepared in silence. Charles did not deny it. That refusal to deny became its own confession. Charles quietly admitted the ruling had been accelerated after the Windsor naming protocol meeting. The king said that moment changed the whole question because Harry had asked for protections reaching beyond one reign and into William's future. Harry stood still. The meeting he thought was a shield had become the weapon used against him. Harry left without bowing to the silence. Charles remained behind with the signed file, knowing his son had walked out wounded, not defeated. But the deeper truth waited beyond that room. The king may have signed the ruling, but others had helped build the walls around it. Power in the monarchy rarely announces itself. It moves through careful words, quiet warnings, and decisions prepared before anyone calls them final. William did not shout. He did not need to. As future king, his concern carried weight inside every corridor. For Harry, this made the ruling feel even colder. It was not only a father's decision. It was the future closing ranks against him. William read the final brief alone before meeting Charles, and the prince stopped when Archie and Lilibet's names appeared. The final brief was a prepared palace file that gathered the ruling, the reasons behind it, and the risks if the decision was challenged. It mattered because this was not loose family talk anymore. It was written policy. It was the kind of document that turned private pain into official direction. And William knew Harry would see every line as proof that his brother had helped close the door. Charles asked the question softly. Was the ruling too harsh? The king did not ask as a monarch testing policy. He asked as a grandfather who knew the children's names would carry the mark of this decision. William chose his words with care because one wrong sentence could sound cruel, even if the meaning was duty. He told Charles that titles must reflect active connection to the crown, not birth alone. The prince believed royal status could not remain powerful if it was detached from royal service. William felt the cost as soon as he said it. He knew the decision protected the future line, especially the path ahead for George, Charlotte, and Louis. Future line meant the direct family path expected to carry the monarchy forward. And for William, that path had to be clean, stable, and free from confusion. If Archie and Lilibet received full recognition while living fully outside palace control, the prince feared every future ceremony would become a question, every invitation a test, every absence a headline. Charles listened, but the king did not look relieved. He looked trapped. William had given him the answer the monarchy needed, not the answer Harry wanted. That was the tragedy. One son was asking for protection through love. The other was warning that love without rules could damage the crown they were all born around. William revealed through a documented account prepared for Charles that advisors had warned about a dual royal identity problem. That meant children could carry public royal meaning while living beyond palace duty, palace discipline, and palace messaging. The prince did not invent the warning, but he accepted its force. Harry would later feel politically isolated, because the argument had moved from emotion to structure, and structure rarely bends. A confidential palace chart made the isolation clearer. It showed how the ruling protected the direct working line, and reduced future claims around ceremony, access, and title use. Charles saw a solution. William saw protection. Harry would see betrayal. And once William's position became clear, Meghan understood the consequences would not stay behind palace walls. When the news reached Montecito fully, the fallout began not as politics, but as heartbreak inside one family home. The palace expected anger. It expected statements, calls, and pressure. But the first reaction was silence. Meghan stood across from Harry as the reality settled between them. Their children's names had become the battlefield. Harry had faced cameras, lawsuits, exile, and royal rejection. Yet this cut differently. This reached into bedtime stories, school forms, family history, and the painful question of what his children would one day believe about him. Meghan read the summary slowly, and for a moment she said nothing. The summary was the shortened version of the palace ruling, written so the decision could be explained without exposing every private argument behind it. It mattered, because this was the language the world would hear first, and language has power. One careful phrase could make the ruling sound calm. One cold sentence could make Harry feel erased all over again. Harry watched Meghan fold the paper once. She did not throw it down. She did not cry out. She simply placed it away from the children's things, as if the page itself carried something too heavy to sit near their ordinary life. Archie and Lilibet were still too young to understand what had happened, but that made the pain sharper. Harry and Meghan now had to decide how one day they would explain that a grandfather's palace had drawn a line around their names. The palace moved quickly behind the silence. Charles prepared a controlled statement that focused on duty, continuity, and the king's responsibility to protect the monarchy. Duty meant official service done for the crown, and continuity meant keeping the royal system stable from one reign to the next. To Charles, those words sounded necessary. To Harry, they sounded like armor placed over a wound. Meghan asked the question that changed the room. Did the ruling affect future invitations, balcony appearances, and ceremonial recognition? Balcony appearances meant the public moments where royals stand together during major events, and ceremonial recognition meant being included in symbolic family occasions tied to the crown. Harry understood instantly why she asked. If the decision reached that far, then Archie and Lilibet were not only losing title recognition, they were losing future visibility. Harry felt the old fear return. He had tried to escape the institution to protect his family, yet the institution had still found a way to define his children from a distance. He thought about school forms, introductions, birthdays, and the day Archie or Lilibet might ask why their cousins stood closer to the palace story than they did. That thought broke something inside him. Harry then learned through a private call with a former palace staff member that internal briefing language had already been updated. The staff member explained that there was no expectation of future title restoration written into the new guidance. Title restoration meant reversing the ruling later and giving the children formal recognition again. The absence of that phrase told Harry the palace did not see this as a delay. It saw it as an ending. Meghan looked at him and understood the danger of that ending. Harry was not only angry now, he was cornered. But just when he felt fully trapped, the emotional direction shifted. The shift did not come from lawyers, aides, or statements. It came from two brothers facing what was left between them. The turning point was not dramatic in the way the palace feared. There was no shouting, no slammed door, no public declaration. It was quieter than that. William and Harry spoke privately, without aides, without wives, without the old machinery of royal damage control. For the first time in years, the argument stopped being about titles and became about what both men had lost. William agreed to the conversation because silence had become too dangerous. The prince did not offer a reversal, and Harry knew that before the first word was spoken. A reversal meant canceling the king's ruling and restoring the position that had just been denied, and that mattered because it would make Charles look weak after confirming the final decision. William came for another reason. He wanted to stop the wound from becoming permanent hatred. Harry entered expecting judgment. He had heard enough palace language to know when sympathy was being used to cover strategy. But William did not begin with the crown. He began with the children. The prince said Archie and Lilibet should never have become symbols in an adult war, and Harry looked at him sharply because those words sounded close to regret. Not apology, not yet, but regret. Harry asked the question that cut through every excuse. Would William accept the same decision for George, Charlotte, or Louis? The prince went still. George, Charlotte, and Louis were not just his children. They were the direct future of the monarchy, and that difference had always protected them. Direct future meant the family line expected to carry the throne forward without interruption. Harry knew that. William knew that. And for one painful second, both brothers understood the unfairness hiding inside the system. William admitted the ruling protected the crown, but he did not pretend it protected Harry's heart. The prince said the monarchy had chosen clarity because confusion would create future conflict, but clarity could still feel cruel when children were named inside it. Harry listened, not softened, but quieter. He had expected defense. He had not expected his brother to admit the human cost. William then revealed through a private recorded conversation between the brothers that Charles hesitated before signing. The prince said the king kept Archie and Lilibet's names separate from the harsher legal language because he refused to let the file sound like a personal rejection. Legal language meant the strict wording used to make a palace decision official, and Charles had softened what he could, even while signing what he believed duty required. Harry absorbed that slowly. His father had denied active royal title recognition, but he had not erased Archie and Lilibet from family memory. That difference did not heal the wound. It did not change the ruling, but it stopped the pain from becoming a complete deletion. Harry hated the decision, yet he understood something new. Charles had acted as king while still struggling as a grandfather. William left the conversation carrying guilt. and Harry left carrying a grief that was no longer simple anger. The brothers had not repaired the past. They had only touched the truth beneath it. But once the world saw the decision, private pain became public judgment. By morning, the private decision had become a national spectacle. The palace wanted control, but the story moved faster than any statement. It crossed breakfast tables, studio panels, phone screens, and palace gates. Some saw Charles as a king finally drawing a line. Others saw a grandfather punishing children for their parents' choices. And one image captured the entire emotional storm. Harry saw the coverage before the palace statement had finished moving through every channel. His children's names were no longer inside a family argument. They were printed, spoken, judged, and debated by people who had never met them. Public reaction meant the way ordinary people, broadcasters, and newspapers responded to the ruling. And it mattered, because the monarchy survives not only through law, but through belief. If people believed Charles had acted with discipline, the crown looked stronger. If people believed he had acted without mercy, the wound became national. Charles watched a morning broadcast without interrupting it. The king heard one commentator call the decision necessary clarity, then another ask whether a grandfather had allowed the crown to overrule his heart. Palace officials framed the ruling as clarification, not punishment. Clarification meant making the rules plain, so there would be no confusion later. But Charles knew plain rules could still hurt. He had protected order, yet the screen made him face the emotional cost. Harry felt the damage deepen as Archie and Lilibet's names appeared again and again. He had fought royal battles before, but this was different because his children could not answer back. They could not explain themselves. They could not choose whether the world used their names as symbols. Harry realized the decision had taken private family pain and turned it into a public argument his children never asked to join. One London newspaper front page dominated the day. The headline read, "The King's Final Line," placed above a split image of Charles and Harry, with Archie and Lilibet's names printed beneath a black royal crest. A royal crest means the official symbol connected to monarchy and family identity, and the dark version made the whole story feel like mourning. It was not just a headline. It was a verdict before the palace could speak. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered. Some held signs supporting the king, saying duty had to come first. Others left children's drawings near the gates, quiet little messages that turned the argument softer and more painful. The palace had expected debate. It had not expected crayons, folded paper, and ordinary families asking whether royal children should carry adult punishment. Charles heard about the drawings later and said nothing at first. The king understood that the public was not only judging policy, they were judging love. Harry understood the same thing from far away, and that made the distance between father and son feel even greater. The public storm forced the palace toward one final emotional message. The ruling could no longer hide behind procedure. It had to explain what the decision truly meant. And when the noise finally settles, the verdict is not about paperwork, it is about what survived and what was lost. In the end, the decision did exactly what final decisions do. It ended arguments, but not pain. Charles protected the monarchy as he believed a king must. Harry protected his children as he believed a father must. Neither man walked away victorious. The titles were settled, the palace line was fixed, and the family truth became impossible to hide. Love remained, but trust had been broken. Charles sat alone after the final statement was released, and the silence around him felt heavier than the document itself. The final statement was the palace's official message explaining the decision to the public, and it mattered because it became the version history would remember first. Archie and Lilibet remained loved as his grandchildren, but they were placed outside active royal title recognition and HRH use in palace practice. HRH use meant the formal His Royal Highness or Her Royal Highness style used by senior royals. and its removal in practice drew a line between family blood and public royal function. Harry closed the file for the last time. He did not slam it. He did not shout. He simply pressed the cover shut, as if refusing to give the palace any more power over his breathing. The ruling had settled the titles, but it had not settled the hurt. To Harry, the decision proved something painful and freeing at once. Archie and Lilibet's worth could not be granted by a palace, and it could not be taken away by one either. Charles knew history might call him firm. The king also knew his son might call him unforgiving. That was the burden he had chosen. The monarchy presented the decision as a defining boundary between family identity and royal function. Family identity meant who someone is by blood and love. Royal function meant the official duties, privileges, and public roles connected to serving the crown. Charles believed those two things could no longer be treated as the same. William understood the victory and the loss. The prince saw that the crown had been protected from confusion, future disputes, and divided expectations. But he also understood the cost. Another emotional distance between brothers, another wound added to a family already carrying too many. William did not celebrate the decision. He accepted it, and that acceptance carried its own sadness. Harry looked at Meghan and chose the only answer left to him. He would not beg for palace approval. He would not let Archie and Lilibet grow up believing their value depended on a title. Meghan understood that choice, and she saw the change in him. The hurt was still there, but it no longer owned the whole room. The hidden truth was simple. The ruling did not destroy the family bond completely. It exposed how fragile that bond had already become. Charles chose duty over softness. Harry chose his children over any remaining hope of palace approval. William chose order, even while knowing order could still break hearts. The story ends with no reversal, no rescue, and no unfinished question. Only the hard truth that the crown can define titles, but it cannot define a father's love. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.